So hello and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the first session of Winter 2023 FCI Live. This is our free series of cutting edge topics about what's going on in the startup co-op world. And today we have Joel Kopishke here from Seven Roots with the topic of how to govern in stage 2A. And Joel and I were joking around just as he got here because he's like, I don't have like mind-blowing things to say about this, like just things that take the roof off. And I said, well, the reason we wanted this in the series, and we did ask Joel to present this, is because we hear from all of you that we're not talking enough about what governance is and how to utilize policy, especially in these early stages. So when you get to the point that you're about to hire a GM, you already know what policy is, you have it in place, you have some muscle for that. And that starts here in 2A. And what we see is a lot of starts panicking in stage 3 going, oh my God, we wrote those policies and threw them on a shelf somewhere, or we didn't even get around to writing them. And we certainly don't know what they're for. So we asked Joel to come talk about governance in stage 2A, what to focus on, how you're building your muscle to be ready for policy-based governance, and how you can start to use policy now. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Joel, and thanks so much for being here.
Well, hello, welcome everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me, JQ. So, I'll invite you all to, put your name and your co-op name into the chat, so we can get an idea of who's here. If you want to put, what stage your co-op is in or what your role is, any of those sorts of details, all that's great. So we can all see who's here, who we're chatting with today. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Let's see, why don't I share my screen here? There, I think that's still the right title. So excellent, good. And so that's the Seven Roots team. And just briefly, for those of you who may not know us, who may not have a chance to meet us, Seven Roots, we do design and operational support for food co-ops and other community-driven organizations. But we're all part of the Seven Roots team because we believe in healthy food access and community ownership and the co-op model. And we are a proud worker co-op. And there's 4 of us. Nicole Klimick does store planning and design and programming and equipment specification and interior design work. Kevin O'Donnell is operations prepared foods expert. In fact, he's operations manager at Hunger Mountain Food Co-op. Keeps him busy. And then I'm joined here today by Heather Lazikis, who does marketing and branding for us, as well as is kind of our leader of the Seven Roots team. And I'm Joel. I focus on governance and leadership and kind of some of our internal organization and working with clients. So my background is, some of you have, I'm sure, heard me tell the story. Once upon a time, I accidentally got elected to the board of directors of my local food co-op. And I didn't, I mean, I knew I was running in an election, but I had no idea what I was in for. I had never been on a board before, had no idea what it was supposed to look like, and ended up stepping into a board that was pretty dysfunctional, and eventually found myself as board chair pretty shortly into it, and got some help along the way, and really started to understand and enjoy governance. This was at Outpost Natural Foods in Milwaukee. And then from there, I started supporting other co-ops with governance and facilitation and things like that. I got the chance to study with John Carver and learn policy governance right from the horse's mouth, as it were. I've worked with a number of startup co-ops along the way, Friendly City, East Aurora, a bunch of other ones. So I've taught foundational governance. I've even had the immense pleasure of presenting on governance topics at CCMA and Up and Coming, and even, I even got to do it with JQ once or twice. So that's how lucky I am. So this is what we're gonna tackle today. Hopefully, at the end of today, we've all improved our understanding of why and how to scale governance systems and practices as the co-op grows and the work complexifies. Is complexifies a word? I'm not sure. That's the concept. And we want to know how to implement good governance practices in stage 2. So, what is governance? Well, at a very high, broad level, I'm just going to go through some kind of definitions of governance, build kind of the context for how I think about governance. The root of the word comes from the Greek to steer. And I love that because we're steering our organizations towards success. And functionally, that means we're answering key questions, we're defining roles and responsibilities, and we're establishing processes for setting expectations and ensuring accountability. So in cooperative governance, that means some of the things we do, we're going to articulate the direction and purpose and facilitate the organization's movement in that direction. We're going to work together effectively for shared purpose. We're going to empower people and hold them accountable. And we're going to create and sustain a culture of participation and democracy, because as co-ops, we are democratic organizations and we want participation in different ways. And so what it looks like, making decisions on behalf of others, setting expectations, we promote and represent the co-op, we hire staff until the GM is hired. Lots of stuff going on. And so the elements that I like to think of is governance includes trusteeship, vision and future focus, and delegation and accountability, role clarity, unity of voice when we're working as a board and as an organization, and governance perpetuation, being sure that what we're doing will last. So that's kind of how I paint the broad strokes picture of what is governance. And I'll take a breath now because that was a lot. Any thoughts or questions on just governance in general? Now's a great time. You can toss it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you got something, or you can raise your hand if you know how to do that on here as well. All right, no questions.
I'd love to hear if anyone wants to throw it in the chat. You can throw it in the chat, but what do you specifically hope that Joel will get to today? Make sure you throw it in the chat so we don't miss it, okay?
Excellent call out there. Okay, so the second part of our title today was stage 2, 2A specifically. So what's happening now? What are you doing? Those of you, I didn't get a chance to look at what everyone's doing. I see at least 1 2A. You guys dropped in there. 1B. So those are the stages I'm seeing. So, but what does governance look like for you right now? What are you doing? Toss some stuff in the chat. Either people are typing and it hasn't gotten to me yet, or everyone's feeling shy on this Monday.
I think people are typing.
There we go. Applying for money to pay for feasibility. Yep. Walking a fine line between 2A, 2B, and 3.
Usually it's between just 2, but Long Beach decided to overachieve. They're walking 3 phases.
Overachieve, okay.
Marketing and site decisions. So this is interesting.
Yeah.
Comments aren't about governance challenges. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And this is what we often see is everyone, you're focused so much on this really, really big, important work of developing the co-op that when we ask people what's going on with governance, they kind of look at us and blank.
Oh, and here comes Christy. talk about governance, building up our board, increasing ownership, absolutely, applying for grants, searching for a site. 2A, site and financing. Strategic planning meeting at the next board meeting. Create our chart of roles and responsibilities. You have a market
Nice.
feasibility study. Nice. This is all good stuff. Feel free to keep adding in there. And we're going to move on and talk about stage 2. And again, I'm not going to do a deep dive into what is stage 2. Hopefully you've got all the fantastic FCI resources and you've been digging through those, and you may have printed out a nice dog-eared copy of the startup guide. My PDF has the corners are very curled on that thing from opening it so many times in on my computer. So yeah, in stage 2, we get into the market study, we get into the pro forma. Those things cost money, so maybe we're out applying for grants, otherwise raising funds. We start doing site selection stuff, hire a project manager. We got a capital campaign, hire a GM. So there's lots of stuff going on, lots of stuff on our plate. Stage 2 has tons of organizational activity that all of a sudden takes off, and we've got these big things. So, and I'm seeing more stuff about adding board members, new board members, trying to understand where we are and where to go. Well, hopefully we'll give you a little bit of guidance there today. So we got all this stuff queued up in stage 2. In 2A, one of the ones I'll highlight is we're hiring a project manager. Well, great. Well, to be able to do that well, we got to have good systems. We've got to be able to hire the person well. We need to be able to delegate to them well. We need to be able to hold them accountable. So all of this stuff, and develop our governance leadership. So I think I'm gonna quote JQ and FCI here. Maybe Stuart wrote this, but this is under 2A. It's never too early to identify ways that your group's process can be strengthened by refining and developing key systems that can help the group build capacity. The feasibility and planning stage is when the co-op begins to make a major investment of time and money in the cooperative. Professionals within the co-op sector will assist you with your project, and they will help you save some time and money in the long run. So I just wanted to quote that because I thought there's no way I'm gonna. JQ says that was Stuart. All right, that was definitely Stuart. And I just wanted to quote that because I'm not sure I'll say anything that eloquent today. So there's always time to improve systems, and the sooner is always better. So in this 2A, you've got your bylaws and articles of incorporation in place. You've got your board of directors. Maybe you've gone through an election cycle or two. All depends on how quickly you've moved through things. So you want to prepare yourself. You're really laying the foundation now for this, opening the doors and having an operational food co-op. So we're going to be transitioning from, originally this idea started with a bunch of you maybe around someone's kitchen table or sitting around a table in a diner or something. And now you've got, we've made it official, and now we've got this working group. And maybe, as you get into stage 2, you usually have people who weren't there from the beginning who are now involved, and you have people who aren't always in the room. We don't always have the same small handful of people. We probably have some committees or some working groups. And so we need to be able to figure out, okay, how do we communicate out? How do we make sure that our systems support us as we grow, and not just where we're at right now, but where we're going to be in the next 6 months, because we want to lay the foundation to really be able to work together well and have what we need. As we move into stage 2B, when we're going to hire a general manager, and we're going to do the big governance transition from, hey, we do all the work, to now we really need to learn how to delegate well. If we haven't figured it out by now, this can be really tough, which is why we want to get good at it earlier. So when we've got a project manager and a general manager, we know how to do this.
You know what I think of, Joel, when you say this is the idea of, anyone who's ever had an inexperienced manager, right? Someone who's like learning and they are the guinea pig, right? Like you're the guinea pig to this new person in management, and how that can be really challenging, right? And so that's just, one element of this, but that's kind of what I'm hearing and what you're saying is this idea that, hey, as a board, you were just sort of a group of people and, moving through this thing. And if things didn't go well, you were sort of bearing the brunt of that, right? If there weren't good systems. But once we've got a project manager or a GM involved, this is that person's livelihood. So, as boards, we've become responsible for their, sort of day-to-day work experience and this portion of their career. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, thanks for that, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, so we've talked about governance, we've talked about stage 2, 2A, 2B. So why now? Why are we talking about governance in 2A? A couple reasons. We want to get good at it, and we want time to practice. Is the time to learn to fly a plane when you're on a critical mission, or when you've got some time to learn it and maybe screw up without big consequences and get it to the point where it's second nature, where you've got some muscle memory of how to do this well? That's why in sports teams practice. So when the game is on the line, you've got that muscle memory, you're used to doing it. When the stakes are higher, you've got lots of repetitions in. And with governance can be tricky. It can be counterintuitive at times. So it's tough to pick up immediately. So we want to do that. Building these good systems will make this stage 2, as we listed all these organizational things that are happening. Well, these good systems will actually make that hard work easier. So yes, Sheila, learning to fly while you're in the air. Yeah. Well, you want some time on the simulator. So yeah, this work is hard no matter what, and it's less hard if we've got good systems and know what to expect of each other. The other thing that we've seen is when you're good at this and you've got the efficiency, that's great. We've seen co-ops that have struggled with that. They don't have the systems, they don't have the efficiency, and they end up actually delaying their project, delaying their opening. So, and again, I'm probably going to mention this a half dozen times, you're going to end up hiring a GM. And as Heather said, you want to be a good boss. You want to practice this stuff. You want to be in the position so that you are hitting the ground running when you bring that GM on board.
And if I may add, Joel, just a reality check from FCI that it has been a factor in many startups that have ended up in critical situations after open, that the board was not prepared to govern, that the board didn't know what policies really were, how you use them, what they were for. They didn't have the muscle to deal with challenging situations and tough conversations to get through those things with their GM, or to know even how to assess if the GM was doing their job. And a lot of that muscle's built in 2A.
Yeah, and I'll mention this again later too, but it's a buyer's market for GMs right now. They're going to have their pick of where they want to go, and being really well organized and having good systems in place and being able to show that work to a GM and say, well, here's our policies, here's our last 3 or 6 months worth of agendas and meeting minutes and all of that. And a GM is going to look at that and they're going to really consider it. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, these guys, this group is really, seems like they really work well. They've got good systems in place. I'm not going to be stepping into the Wild West here. So, all right. So another chance for everyone to interact here. So how's it going? As you think about your board and the life of your board, what's going well? And maybe what isn't? We don't have to throw anyone under the bus here, but we know governance is hard. So so let us know what seems to be going well and where are the challenges. Maybe that's another way of putting it.
Do you want people to throw answers in the chat? Yep.
There we go. Board engagement and alignment. Chrissy, I assume that you are saying that's going well.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, it's actually going okay. It's just something I think that we are constantly trying to improve.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yes, board engagement and alignment. Yeah, those are things that I think that something that will never go away. I think that's something that boards should always focus on. How can we be sure that our board engagement, that everyone is involved and engaged and that we're aligned. Not that we have to agree on everything, but that we're aligned in the vision, we're aligned in how we're communicating, we're aligned in process. Casey from Free Range, our board is unclear about how malleable policies are versus being static. Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Sheila talking about delegation and accountability. I'm not sure, again, if this is what we're doing well, or if this is something that is a challenge for us. Challenge is getting people involved to do tasks. Right now, everything seems to be coming down to me and 2 or 3 volunteers. Board engagement needs to be improved. We need to get several people off the board as they do not do anything and never step up. Yeah, you need to call if that's the appropriate thing to do at certain times. We are getting policies together. Oh, I love to hear that. Utilizing committees to move forward and divide up the work. I suggested starting committees in November as a way to get everyone to work better together with mixed results sometimes. Some groups are great at showing up and some others aren't. Yeah. Getting that commitment, getting clear on commitment and accountability, very important. Where do we get more training and examples of the types of reports we'll have to learn to read and understand? Ooh, good question there. So let's see. Do we want to jump into some of these, or do we want to move forward and be sure we circle back and tackle some of these? What are you thinking, Heather?
I think we move forward and circle back, right? Because then we'll have
Okay.
like the full picture of all the things at the end, and we can kind of just come back and all chit chat at the end. That would be my inclination.
Okay. That was what I was thinking too, but I didn't want anyone to feel like, oh, we're just asked for these.
We're not ignoring you. Yeah.
Okay. So what's it look like? Some of the stuff you folks called out. Having committee charters and accountability. So I have shared in the past, and I can share it again, a committee charter template, which is pretty thorough. It talks about when the committee meets. It talks about how, what the committee is supposed to accomplish. It talks about what the committee, how the committee is supposed to report back. So we've got expectations and reporting back, so we can have accountability with that. What's the authority? All of that stuff clearly laid out. Thank you, Chrissy. Yes, community work with clear tasks and charges can be just a game changer. So we really, have those written expectations and then have that accountability. Awesome. Clear delegation of roles. So we want within the board of directors what the roles are. And then once we start bringing in others, and again, with our committees, who's in charge of things. So Tiana, yes, I will share committee charter templates with the group afterwards. So yeah, so clear delegation roles. What's the board doing? What's the board in charge of? Oh, now what's this committee in charge of? What's this committee doing? So, you know, I talk about delegation. Delegation, you know, initially I used to think was one thing. It meant, oh, you're going to do this. Heather, you're going to do this. I've delegated it to Heather. There's a second part that's really important that I learned later, which is, Heather, you're going to do this, and I'm not. So now we have that clear delegation. It's like, oh, I'm going to have someone else is going to do it. And that means, oh, I'm not doing. Now my role is accountability. So great. Now I will hold that person accountable. And when we learn to do that internally with ourselves, and we build up those skills, and you know, writing expectations to a committee, having them work, holding them accountable. Same with even individual tasks with our board. And we get good at accountability. And accountability doesn't have to be punitive. We can do it with kindness. We all have lives. We all have things going on. We're not always going to meet all of the deadlines. But if we can do that and build a culture of accountability, boy, that's going to be the foundation of a successful organization. So I had one board where they created a committee and a committee charter, and it ended up that everybody on the board was on that committee. And what they decided to do, though, is what they did really well is they said, we still held the committee meeting separate and wrote committee reports to the board. And I said, that is so great, because you all might have gone, oh, well, we're all here. We don't need to follow the systems because we all know. But it's like they followed the systems. And then, of course, a couple months later, it's like, well, guess what? We brought on a couple new committee members who weren't on the board, and a couple who were on the board cycled off, and they already had that built up. So they had those systems in place, and they had that familiarity doing that. And again, that's what we want to do, is we want to build good systems with our meetings, with our elections, and more. And of course, you know, all of this comes down to having written policies. We have things that we wrote down so everybody's clear on the expectations. What are the benefits of good governance? Again, if you've got ideas, toss them into the chat. What do we get out of having good governance? I have some ideas, of course. Hopefully you've had at least a little bit of experience with good governance, that you've got some stuff to share on this. Growth, accountability, clear expectations. Yes, yes, yes. Clear expectations, better cooperation. Boy, I feel like my lungs are filling up with air when I read these. Everyone is trained.
That's governance
equally.
nerd stuff, like big time there, Joel.
Yeah. Yeah, stuff gets done. Yes. Awesome. All right, you can continue to put some more in there, and I'm gonna move on and talk about them in a specific way here. Successful delegation. Thank you, Sheila. So good governance benefits for you and your board. You get, at its core, you get better board culture. And that has tremendous benefits. You get a culture of efficiency. You know, I see good communication among board members. Edie, thank you. Casey said good policies prevent time spent on duplicating discussions. Absolutely. So we get more efficient. We get this better culture. We get a culture of accountability. We get a culture where we get stuff done. And what happens is when you get when you have a good culture in place, you have to keep working on it, but you're going to start attracting people who really want to get the work done, who want to do the work, and who can operate efficiently. If your culture is messy, you're probably going to attract people who are drawn to messy situations and maybe aren't as good at that. So if you have someone in mind, it's like, oh, that person would be so great for our board. Well, that's a really good reason to clean things up. So when that person is invited in, they come in, it's like, well, look, I'm busy, but I see this group is really getting stuff done and they're organized. And with all of that, it's more fun. So when you got that culture where you're getting stuff done and you're organized, really, really fantastic. And then as the ripples come out from there for your co-op and your community, you're more nimble with important decisions, which is so important during stage 2. There are going to be a lot of decisions that are going to need to be made quickly to keep your project schedule on track. And if you've got good systems and you've practiced them well, you are nimble and able to really make important decisions and vet them well because you've had practice doing it. And like I said earlier, you're going to be more attractive to GMs. So how does governance change as the co-op grows? Well, there's a higher risk. We are putting the community's money at stake. There are more important decisions, selecting a site, things like that. More complex communications. Early on, it's, hey, we've got this idea, come join us. Now there's a lot more complex communications, both to the community as well as within the organization. We've got more committees, we've got lots more moving parts. And again, there's more delegation there. And it's tougher to stay aligned. I've been with a number of small startup companies, and at the beginning, it's really easy. You don't need any bureaucracy. You don't need any systems, because there's just a handful of us. We all know what's going on all the time. And as things grow, that gets tougher. Good systems lead to good decisions. You can flip a coin and get it right, and you can do that a few times in a row. But you have not built a sustainable model for making good decisions. And that's what you want. Good systems will lead to good decisions. They'll lighten the load. Like I said earlier, hard work becomes easier with good systems in place. And they'll last beyond your presence there. That can be your legacy. You know, when I talk about leadership, I'm like, good leaders have to be two things. They need to be vitally important to the organization, and they need to be imminently replaceable. So you want to build up that perpetuation. You want to build it up so that the systems are in place, so things will go on. If something comes up in your life, something comes up in someone's life who's on the board, who's been a critical member, they can have that correct kind of balance and go take care of that stuff in their life. And we've got the systems that will keep us going there. So these are my steps to get started here, and then we're gonna kind of move into Q&A. So assess where you are, and I've got a couple tools that can help with that. A previous FCI live I did on the perfect month in your board, we kind of talked about what some of the processes around your meeting flow and the workflow over the month that can help. I've got a checklist on board fundamentals and foundational stuff, and so you can really look and feel like, oh, okay, wow, hey, we're doing great on this. You know, we do really well with our agendas and minutes. Fantastic, great. And oh, our committee charters, yeah, those could use some work. And then you can identify priorities, improve and implement your systems and processes. And if you're in stage 2, it is time to write policies. And that does not have to be as daunting as it feels. I've helped many co-ops write their first policy register, and we can get it at the right size, so it's not this overwhelming thing. You're going to want more robust policies once you have a general manager in place, but we can find an interim step to get you with policies that'll support the board work. It'll get you practicing and getting good at holding yourselves accountable in that way. And then we start monitoring those policies. Chris Borton, would you mind giving actual examples and scenarios applied to these principles from your experience when appropriate? I will, as they occur to me. I gave that one example of the board that that had committee meetings, you know, with the same group that was at their board meeting, and they would giggle when they would like end the committee meeting and call the board meeting to order, because they said it was, you know, they felt a little silly at first, and then it really set them up for when those committees started to change, and they had additional committees. So alrighty. So why and how to scale our governance systems and practices as the co-op grows and work complexifies, and know how to implement good governance practices in stage 2. So now is the time we can go back to that list of stuff that people put in there, and we can kind of shift to some more conversation here for the last 15 or 20 minutes here. I'm just going to scroll this chat back up. Challenge is getting people involved to do tasks. Yeah, so I think it's important to be able to articulate the vision, the big vision, and articulate the need for folks to step up and help. And a twist on that can be, you know, the folks who have been helping, have them talk about what they've gotten out of helping, what they've gotten out of their service on the board, on committees. Because, you know, most of us, I would say actually all of us, all of the time, think about what's in it for me. Now, sometimes that what's in it for me is I get a tremendous, you know, wonderful, warm glow feeling helping others. So, but that's the get for me, you know. And so talk about it's like, well, what do I get? You know, I got to work with these cool people, you know, really, you know, we got to work on something important that's going to benefit our community, you know. Spend some time and talk about that, and use that as some talking points as you're talking to folks in the community, when you're looking to get people involved to do things. I see we got a couple of new messages here. Should each team have a policy? Well, I'm not sure exactly how you're thinking of the team. But the way I think about it is, you know, with governance, the board has all the authority. If you're going to authorize someone or someone's else to do some work, you need stuff written down. If it's going to be a committee or a task force, we need to write down, well, what are the expectations? What's the authority? Is there a budget? You know, how often do we expect that group to meet? How do we expect that group to report back to us? And so then we've got clear expectations, and we can have that accountability. So if you've got a communications team, outreach team, business team, you know, other stuff that you're doing, you should definitely have committee charters or something similar that talks about, you know, how those expectations, you know, so it's all written down, so there's clarity, and there's a feedback loop, so we can have that accountability at the board level where the authority for the organization lies.
That one's huge, Joel. I remember one time someone explained to me that, you know, it always feels nice to give people like a long leash, right? If, again, it's sort of more in a management setting, to say, oh yeah, you know, this is the task, and let someone go off and do it. But the problem being that if people don't have a clear picture of what's supposed to happen and what the end result is, or, you know, what that accountability looks like, everyone's going to do the best that they can, and the thing that they think will be best for the task. but those things are not always the same things amongst us. And then everybody feels bad on the other side, right? I might feel bad because Joel didn't do the thing the way I thought he was supposed to. Then Joel feels bad because I'm upset because he did a thing the way he thought was best, but I don't think it was any good. And then the thing doesn't get done. So it's sort of, yeah, just to sort of emphasize what you're saying there. I think that one's so huge. But hey, I was peeking up in the chat, and well, you've been doing this, so I don't know, maybe I should like lob some at you, Joel. So there's a question of, our board is unclear how malleable policies are versus being static. I don't think we hit on that before, right?
We did not.
Okay,
We
great.
did not. And I'm assuming I think that was Casey from Free Range, who also said our board uses the policy register, but we started having other procedural policies elsewhere in our handbook. So this is the way that I think about some things like that. If the policies are changeable, but the idea is that they're fixed. This is what we've agreed on, and this is how we're going to do it and how we're going to hold ourselves accountable. We can change our minds on that. You know, the board has the authority to do that, but generally, you know, at that level, what you're typically referring to are core principles, clear outcomes. Then I think of a second set of documents that are like, this is how we've decided to. So we're going to talk about, you know, our approach in board meetings, you know, and building agendas and things like that. And we're, you know, generally we're going to do that. And then we might have some very specific process documents that are like, look, this is how we decided we're going to execute some of these things, implement some of these things for the time being. So I don't like to throw everything into a policy that's monitored. Some of these how-to documents, like, oh, how do we handle, you know, how do we handle our board monthly workflow? Like how many days before, you know, do we get the packet out and things like that. Some of those things don't necessarily need to rise to the level of policy. If the policy says, you know, the packet is sent out with adequate time for review by board members, you know, but then we can have process documents that talk about, oh, this is how we're going to handle guests at meetings. This is how we're going to handle our monthly workflow on, you know, how I can ask for an agenda item to be put on there, how I can give feedback on the minutes from the last meeting, things like that. Casey, does that help clarify? Does that make sense? Is that at all what you were asking about? Excellent. Good.
Nice.
A couple other things like that, how we handle elections, how we handle internal board officer elections, things like that are also good process documents to keep. Say, hey, this worked well for us last time. Let's not reinvent the wheel. And you know, if someone comes up with a better idea, great. It still fits the guidelines of our policy.
Awesome. All right, so we've got Kathy asking, where do we get more training and examples of the types of reports we'll have to learn to read and understand?
Well, I know I've got a set that I've played with over the years that I've shared with general managers and boards that say, this is how, based on if these were your policies, this is how I think a fantastic monitoring report would look like for those policies, coming from a general manager. Internally on the board level, there's different ways that the board can monitor itself. Typically, writing a report is not going to be a great return on investment in terms of time spent. Typically, having an approach where someone takes point and leads conversation about what are we doing well, where does it feel like we can improve, things like that is the best way to kind of do board internal monitoring. But I've seen a number of different approaches work as well, including online surveys, things like that.
Cool.
Did I answer that one, Heather?
Kathy? Is that helpful?
Well, actually, I was also thinking about one thing that we haven't really studied is the types of reports that will flow from the general manager to us, to the board. So that's more of what I was talking about.
Yeah, I do have some samples there as well. And again, they're based on a sample policy register that shows, well, this is what I think is a good, clear way. Because I really think the general managers that are really doing a great job with their boards are communicating in a way that makes it easy for the board to understand. And so they're really clear about, okay, this is what the policy said. This is how I'm interpreting that. And this is what the operational definitions look like based on that interpretation. So these are the metrics I'm going to track. And look, here's a chart. Here's a graph of those metrics over time, comparison to budget, maybe, things like that. So we've got good graphic detail. What I don't like to see is, here's our financial monitoring, here's a 38-page spreadsheet. That's not respecting the role of the board of directors. That's either laziness from your GM, or there's some bad stuff in there that they don't want you to find, and they figure if it's buried under 38 pages, you're not going to find it. And so, really, general managers need to not surprise the board also. So when you get a monitoring report, it shouldn't have anything in there that really ultimately surprises you. So if the general manager is getting a sense of, ooh, you know what, our cash on hand is not looking great, or you know what, our sales really took a hit this month. We had those couple of days where we had either snow up to our eyeballs like Buffalo did last fall, or we had rains and the power was out, like I know folks in California have had over the last couple of weeks. Heads up. You don't surprise your board. You give them a heads up and say, hey, just so you know, when you get this report, the sales numbers are going to be down. This is why. There'll be more explanation in the report. JQ?
I do want to put a quick plug, because I know Kathy's coming from a stage 3 perspective, which is not where we're aiming today. If you're looking at how GMs report, we have a phenomenal session Wednesday, this exact same time slot, with Sam McCormick, who is a GM, an experienced GM with Asset Co-op Market, not just looking at how GMs report, but specifically what you can expect them to report on during the GM transition before the stores open, what it should look like. And they're actually going to share their template for how a GM can actually report to a board during that phase. And they have worked through with their board what an amount of information is overwhelming versus useful during the transition. So please come be a part of that if you're a stage 3er, especially.
Awesome.
Sweet. That's a great one. All right. Another question I've got here. We've got a handful. So when you say policies, do you mean the ends, Joel?
Ends are one of your policies. If you're using policy governance, which is not the only way to do it, but for me, I think it's probably the best way. I haven't found a way that I like better, and lots of folks are doing it. So in the food co-op world, last I heard, over 80% or so of food co-ops were using policy governance. So what you've got there is you've got built-in resources on folks for how to do this well. And under policy governance, you have 4 sets of policies. You have your ends, which articulate the strategic direction of the organization. What does success look like? Why are we here? Then you have limitations, executive limitations. So as your GM is trying to achieve all those things that you laid out in the vision and success in your ends policy, these are the guardrails that they must keep to. So, you have to have adequate liquidity, adequate, sales, adequate membership growth, things like that. Over 90% use policy governance at this time. Fantastic. And then you have 2 sets of internal board policies. So ends, executive limitations, and then the internal board policies for how the board will operate ground rules for working together as a team and getting the board work done. And then relationship with your general manager. So that could be a subset to how we do our work, but it's important enough that it makes sense as its own piece. It's like, look, this is how we're going to treat our relationship with our general manager. And that's basically going back to one of the early things we said today was how to be a good boss.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got a lot of other written questions here. I see Sean has a hand up. Let's do a live question. Let's shake it up. All right, Sean, jump in.
Hi. Thank you. I sent a direct message of my question to someone accidentally. But so my question is, with the governance, that's what we are right now. We're a board of 8, and we do need help, and we're, speeding faster than we can run. And but do you think that templates to fill out, so we have our policies and procedures, and to report back to the board, maybe a reporting type of system, so maybe a template that has specific questions, okay, whatever the task was for the month before, whatever it was, do you think that's beneficial, where it sticks straight to the point, and we're not veering off the topic or the subject, and it saves time in reporting that way? And then at the same time, we can have that in the minutes, where it's something that we can go back to easily.
I love that idea. And there's another co-op that I'm working with right now that is basically, they said, oh, you know what? I think since we've got a committee charter, wouldn't it be easier if we set up a template for committee meetings and committee reports, so that they're all in the same format? We're putting the same questions and prompts there. And so, because what they're getting is they're getting a mishmash of stuff. And it's like, oh, but if we create a system, and I love that idea. I think that's great.
Thank you. My question was, did you all have one?
I'm working with a board, ask me in another week and I might have one, and I can certainly help any group develop one. But yeah, that's in process. That is it's a great idea.
Thank you.
That's a good one. Well, similar topic here. Yeah, Tiana had a question. Can you share committee charter templates? The answer is yes. So anyone who's looking for resources or anything, why don't you throw your email in the chat? And if you want to specify also, if you're looking for something specific, right, say it, and we'll kind of just pull together what we do have and what we can offer and any nuggets and follow up that way. So we'll just kind of keep you in the loop as we have more things. Is there anything else, Joel, you would say on that?
No. Okay. I just put mine in there too, so you can always reach out to me as well.
Please do throw those emails in the chat. I'm going to share any emails that are in the chat with Joel, so he can follow up with you with a list of resources. So if you registered, I'm not necessarily going to give him your email because we want it to be a choice. So please do put it in the chat.
Yeah, that's huge.
Let's see.
Okay. Joel, I got more questions for you.
You got more questions? All right.
We're running low on time.
Yep.
So
we got a couple minutes left.
Let's see. We dissolved the concept of a move committee as it was not working. We have moved to the team concept. Should each team have a policy? The teams
I think I mentioned that earlier.
Okay, we did talk
charter,
through this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, a charter or something that specifies what the expectations are. Yep.
Okay.
Opal, great question. What are some of the successful early strategies you've encountered for making the growth transition from startup board work to delegation to operations team to avoid power plays while ensuring good communication and setting clear expectations? Wow, there is so much packed into that beautiful short little sentence there. And I think I think the big part of it is exactly what we're talking about, is getting good at that delegation, is that you're doing it and I'm not. And if we get good at that with our committees and with our officers and our task forces, whatever we're calling things, however we're delegating from early on in our board work, and then again, when we hire a project manager, or if we hire someone to do member engagement, things like that, that by the time we hire a GM, hopefully we have gotten good at doing that expectation feedback loop of delegation and accountability. Because yes, it can be difficult. And I think also just having conversations about how is this going to change? And you're going to have some folks who've been the absolute best board members early on as far as getting stuff done, who are not going to be great in the governance role. That's not going to be their strength. The oversight, they're going to find it boring. They want to get in, they want to solve problems. And as you shift to governance, you're mostly assigning problems to be solved. And so it's a very different mindset. So, all right, JQ, how we doing?
I think I need to wrap her up here. So I'm going to say, first, let's give a big round of applause and thank you to Joel for being here, for donating his time to share with us. I would like to make sure, again, if you want to get more information from Joel, put your email in that chat so we make sure he has it for you. Please don't miss upcoming sessions. We have some terrific stuff going on tonight, building the leadership team, which is all about building systems, which Joel talked about with Patrice Lockert-Anthony, who is very experienced in board governance, has been a very successful board president, and does lots of board coaching for startup food co-ops. Come check that out. Tomorrow, we're going to switch into the financial challenges of opening a food co-op today. Don Moffitt and I had a great conversation about how it's changing, what's changing with funding, what's getting easier, what's getting harder, what's costing more, how that's going to affect startups going forward. There are some really positive trends and there are some hard trends. He's going to talk to you about both with his assistant, Sarah Leberts. So please come check that out. And then on Wednesday, we have transitional reporting dashboard. That's the one I was pointing to about how does the GM report to us exactly in a way that is meaningful? What should we expect? We're going to see a terrific example for the transition period as your GM comes on, but the store is not open yet, that can mature into something that is utilized after the store is open, from Stan McCormick. And this is a question we've been trying to solve for a couple years now. And this is the first full-fledged template version we've seen, and they're going to be sharing that and showing you how it works. So thank you real quickly to our sponsors, the USDA, National Cooperative Bank, National Cooperative Grocers, and CoBank for making this series possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
You being here
Again,
and being
reach
part
out
of
if
the
you
day.
got more questions.
Yes. If anyone wants to linger and ask a leftover question or two, Joel might have time, but I'm going to stop recording now. Thanks so much.